Okay, so we are live. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the global audience. I'm hearing a little bit of wind that I'm going to mute. There we go. Okay. Um, Hi, everyone. You've tuned into Isobreak. This is Isobreak 18, the celebrated international reading series founded by Ravi Shankar and co-hosted by uh, Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop. I'm Tim Tomlinson, director of New York Writers Workshop, and today I'm filling the very big shoes of our dear colleague Ravi Shankar, who's out somewhere delivering lectures about John Ashbery while promoting his excellent and acclaimed memoir, Correctional. Ravi sends his regrets that he can't be here. He may check in at a certain point just to wave hello, but I'll attempt to handle all the functions that Ravi's been doing over the last, I guess, 18, 20 months of the lockdown and the pandemic. Today's reading features emerging writers from Australia, India, Japan, and the US. They are Dean Carrison, Irtika Kazi, Indiana Horobin, Varsha Sarya Shah, and Miho Nonaka. And they will be reading in that order. We'll save Q&A for the end of the session, which should be in about, the readings will conclude in about 60 minutes. I will introduce each one with a little bit of their background as we go from reader to reader. I see somebody signing in from Australia. Hello, Australia. And along the way, I will pause at the breaks and just mention a couple of things that our organizations have going on. Asia Pacific Writers and Translators has some very interesting programming coming up in the very near future. New York Writers Workshop, a few things happening. So I'll let everybody know, and we'll probably have somebody post the URLs or the links to various activities in the comments. We welcome everyone to say hello. Please check in. There's somebody from South Australia, Adelaide. Hello, Lizzie Packer. So you can say hello to us in the comments and just give us a sense of where you are, how you're doing, and we'll acknowledge. So now I think we can get to the reading. So today's reading is a showcase for emerging writers. And to start us off, we have Dean Carrison. And let me tell you a little bit about Dean. Dean is an Australian who writes creative nonfiction and fiction, usually on the disconnection of outsiders in foreign environments with international relations contexts. His short form work has appeared in Text Journal, Meniscus, the Bangalore Review, the Joao Roque Literary Journal, which makes us brothers between covers, the Incompleteness Book 2, Live Encounters, Usawa Literary Journal, the Lit Quarterly, Allegory Ridge, and others. This year, he's living in Tbilisi, Georgia, and working on a travel memoir and slowly chipping away at a novel as part of a PhD at Griffith University, Australia. And I'll just say on a personal note that very recently we had the great pleasure of spending maybe 14 days with Dean in Athens, Greece, and Idra in the Aegean Sea on a New York Writers Workshop conference. And Dean was a model of global ambassadorial charm to which I still aspire. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Carrison.
Hey everybody, it's an honor to be here, Tim. So on that note about Greece, it was a wonderful experience, and it's definitely given me a lot of momentum going forward as well these past 2 months, which have just flown by already. And I was going to read from the opening of this narrative nonfiction book I've been writing on the Kurdish and Turkish conflict. But instead, I'm going to read the first half of a narrative essay that was published last year. In King George Square, Brisbane, a crowd of about 50 are gathered, many wearing sky blue. Men, women, children. Australian flags, Uyghur flags, and placards reading Boycott Beijing 2022, Save Uyghurs, Freedom for East Turkestan, China Stop the Genocide, a cartoon image, Auschwitz 1942, Chinese concentration camps 2019. On each side, an arm sticks out of a prison cell, holding hands in the middle with a drop of blood falling. China, where is my uncle? Photo, a middle-aged man next to a young man. I take photos. Most seem to be Uyghurs themselves. A man warmly asks what I'm doing, if I'm just curious. I heard about the rally and wanted to have a look. He says he has family in East Turkestan, Xinjiang. A woman in a blue hijab tells me the same. The event organizer, Drew Pavlu, wears a shirt saying Free Tibet. He was suspended from the University of Queensland for on-campus activism supporting the people of Hong Kong, Tibet, and East Turkestan, the Uyghurs, and for criticizing the university's ties to the Chinese government. Quote, "We've got a free trade agreement with a country that's got 1 million Muslims in concentration camps," Drew says to me and someone else. Speeches begin, standing on a step, the city hall in the background. Drew speaks first. Then he hands a Uyghur man the megaphone, who says, quote, "There were many massacres in different parts of our country since the Chinese invasion of our homeland in 1949. Many massacres were given little or no attention around the world because of hard media control of CCP, because of financial gains leaders of other countries could get. After Chinese Communist government initiated the Belt and Road project since 2014, they built over 300 concentration camps around occupied East Turkestan. Over 3 million innocent Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities held in these camps as subjects to mass torture, rape, starvation, forced abortion and sterilization, medical experimenting, live organ harvesting, forced labor and death. Over 500,000 Uyghur, Kazakh, and other Muslim children are forcibly separated from their families and into orphanages. Truth will always prevail, and you will be held accountable for crimes against humanity. As a Uyghur community as a whole, we urge Australian government to recognise horrible genocide as it is, take decisive action to stop genocide, sanction CCP officials in China, and punish businesses who are getting profits from this slave labour." End quote. An elongated applause is followed by a baby's cry, comforted by presumably its big sister, wearing a blue headband saying "Freedom for East Turkestan." A Catholic priest and a young Hong Konger woman speak. Then a man who might be Tibetan has a speech of his own. Quote, "We never said that Chinese people are bad. I've often said this and I'll say it again. China is composed of 1.4 billion people and the CCP is just, at the most, 100 million. And if we join together, especially Chinese people in the mainland China, we can overthrow the communist government anytime. As you see the 4th generation Uyghur children here, they will never give up." End quote. A girl who's about 5 years old waves a miniature East Turkestan flag and jumps up and down. 18 months earlier, beneath a China Southern aircraft wing, the charcoal and sandy desert is anything but the Chinese landscapes I'm familiar with. This is the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region now, after all. The streets feel eerie in Urumqi, the capital. I'm a little paranoid, like I'm being watched. Sure, with the amount of cameras in China, you could say that about anywhere in the country, but this is different. Solemn. Everything's too manicured. Something's not right. A Didi rideshare car, the Chinese Uber equivalent, drops me outside the Grand Bazaar. I wasn't expecting a front gate where people are queuing up and getting checked by security. An officer pats me down. Passport? I don't have it. I've got a picture on my phone though. Are you a crime? The officer asks. I think in his broken English he says crime, but I'm not sure. Does he mean criminal or spy or something else? What? Are you a crime? I don't understand what you're saying. He directs me a few meters through and instructs me to wait by a wall. It's approaching dusk. Sun gone walkabout behind distant buildings. A colleague shows up. I show this other officer the picture. He checks my face, nods, and lets me pass. Chinese flags and red lanterns are littered throughout the enclosure, every 10 meters off light poles. I've never seen so many before in the several cities in China I've been to, and we're in June. Chinese New Year was months ago. Carnival-like music is playing. Fluoro lights flash from storefronts. This isn't real. Feels like I'm acting in a simulation, a setting everyone knows is superficial, but we play our character anyway. After buying a meat pastry, I enter the indoor part of the bazaar, which is pretty much a hall containing a web of hanging lanterns, some small stores, and a row of dried fruit. But the first thing I notice is a red Carrefour supermarket sign with a downwards arrow following the escalator. Back out in the crowd, I pass a trio of Han Chinese women taking photos of each other, rotating photographer duties. I wave, point to myself, mock photograph with my hands, and point to them. They nod ecstatically, hand me a phone, and pose all together. The great mosque's minarets are illuminated gold, fluoro pink rectangles on the building's exterior. It's 21st century, I guess. Lanterns in the archway and national flags on poles. But the crowd is next door, an ice cream shop. Music's playing, loud, bass, trance. People are laughing at and filming the storekeepers making circus entertainment out of preparing ice creams. This isn't a real bazaar or mosque. I can't help but think this is a communist Disneyized theatre of make-believe Islamic Uyghur culture. When I wake up the next morning, I lament that I've got to spend another night in this place. You can spend months or years in a situation you don't like, but when you're truly uncomfortable, one day is a lifetime you feel you'll never see out. I wonder if the inmates or participants of the re-education camps feel the same, except if my one day is their 1 hour or minute. In a central street, passers-by study me, probably wondering who I am and what I'm doing. What am I even doing here? I knew I was never getting close to the camps. I'm not a BBC journalist with exclusive access, just some traveling dude skating the periphery of truth. Or not even. And the heart of Uyghur culture is in Kashgar, not Urumqi. Not enough time on this stopover. I take off my sunnies, which last night's Diddy driver returned to me today. No point hiding now. I gaze through a street camera. Do you like my brown eyes? They're just like yours. A middle-aged Han woman stares at the alien I am. I smile to disarm her, and she half reciprocates. Young boys in sky blue uniforms play marbles on the pavement outside a bank. Another group kicks a soccer ball back and forth, one boy catching a glimpse of me amid his laughter from missing his kick. Flags and lanterns line the streets again and again. What's the symbolism? You can have your culture within certain parameters, but remember who your rulers are. Your life is a badminton game played on our courts. And I'll wrap it up there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dean. Love that conclusion. Remember who your rulers are. We're being reminded of that more and more here in the U.S. We don't want to be reminded. Um, and I love the line as well. Are you a crime? Weren't people asking you that in Greece as well?
Probably. Maybe I'm immune to it now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Wonderful stuff. And now we're going to move from Tbilisi, Georgia, which is where you're writing in from, calling in from, right, Dean? So we moved from Tbilisi, Georgia to Pune, India. And this might be a good time, before I introduce Irtika, to mention something happening with Asia Pacific writers and translators in um, November of 2022. Asia Pacific Writers and Translators will be hosting a conference in Bangalore, India. That will precede the Bangalore Literary Festival early in December. I'm hoping that somebody can post a link to the APWT event in the chat. I'll be there. Our usual host, Ravi, will be there. Sally will be there. I'm sure Dean is going to make an appearance. And of course, some people in India will be coming over. We'll have an international roster of readers, panelists, workshops, keynoters. Um, it's been a while because the pandemic has closed down. um, AP writers usually ambitious regional conferences. So we're really excited to get that back in track. And now we'll move on to Irtika Kazi, who is a poet from Pune, India, where she's calling in from. A German language expert by day, she is a published poet as well. She introduced her debut poetry collection, Stormbound, in February of 2021. She is published in Contemporary Literary Review India, The Literary Hatchet, Peacock Journal, Madras Courier, Indian Ruminations, The Literary Parrot Anthology, and the Kali Project Anthology. Her poems have been displayed in the Museum of Goa for a poetry exhibit and featured in the 14th episode of When We Met series of Unread in Quarantine by Platform for Artists. Her debut book, Stormbound, was launched by the Quarantine Train Literary Group and in Anantha Festival of Poetry. You can find Irtika on Facebook. And now I welcome to our screens Irtika Kazi.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Um, I mean, I'm really very excited to read for the first time today with APWT and New York Writers Workshop. I came up with my debut poetry collection, Stormbound, in 2021, and the poems that I'm going to read today are from this collection. So, without much ado, I'm going to start reading the poems. The first poem titled is Funeral Hour. Just a heads up, I love amalgamating languages. So since I know German, I tend to, kind of use the German words a lot in my poems. So you'll find a word or two in a few poems, but I will also explain the meanings later. Funeral Hour. How does it feel to have a dream fractured by moonlight luster, like a screaming train on fire? Sorry, I could not be at your funeral, Oittingen im Goy. No train callers could I see. Perhaps they do not reside at the station, where the clock only strikes 12, ante or post meridian, no one knows. Perhaps dreams see no time, like I could not see you. Just smell grief emerging from burnt blackberries, mushrooms surrounding your periphery. A train emerged after a 4 hour long wait. A troubadour whistling in the wind, a troubadour whistling in the wind. So, like I mentioned, there are a few German words also used in the poem. So, Eutingen im Gäu refers here to the train station, which is located in the district of Freudenstadt in southern Germany. The next poem I'm turning to is titled Mermaid of Haiti. Somewhere in the Caribbean, La Cerne holds a mirror to admire herself. Her long straight hair, a clarion call for mariners, the back of the mirror, the back of the mirror, a tautology of sexes, bodies pressed, colliding, the lover, a smell of brackish water and stones. The mirror speaks of eternity, inundation, of two clashing waves or not, the ebb and flow of breasts, a regurgitating sound of oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Blue ash lips conjure up a storm. Tie yourself to the mast of your ship to resist the sirens until they call it a day. Um, so Lasirn is a mythical creature. It's a mermaid and a water spirit, which is quite popular in the Caribbean islands and parts of the Americas. I also love writing about mythical creatures. So that was a poem about Haiti, Mermaid of Haiti. Next, I'm going to read a poem which is about transformation, and it is titled Sunrise. With every sunrise, the hollow of my eyes sink deeper, deeper, until the liveliness in them disappears. I am a phantom listener in a world of fears. With every sunrise, my torpid eyes open to horrid sights of man's inhumanity to man. Flesh for flesh, blood for blood, does it matter if it pours or floods? The hues of red with blues of water intermingle, intersect, to form a puddle of water where children sail their paper boats and clap their innocent hands with joy to the way their vessels float on red water. With every sunrise, my pallid eyes yearn to be closed tight. I am Lady Justice with no blinds. How now to discover the color of existence, not red anymore? Perhaps green or black or yellow or the color of God's hand? With every sunrise, I wake up alive and wonder if a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, does it still remember being a caterpillar? Moving on, um, I'm going to read my next poem. What would you have done? In a fallen state, the dahlia at my window calls for help. Now a lacuna in the grey wall, I pick her up from the edge and rub the pink of her cheek, reprimanding. She gave away a lot of herself and smiled more often to neighbors. She was supposed to look more coralish that day, but chose to look blue instead. She had a mind of her own. What would you have done to a dying dahlia? Let her secret remain lying there in the depths of her ill glory? My window is no more a flowery bower. I hurl her at the sky. Let her feed, breed, and die. Next, I'm going to read a poem which is on the theme of home, um, and it is titled A Place Like Home. This poem has also appeared in the Home anthology. The word for home is feminine, But I have seen father sketching rooms sensitively at his drafting table, perched on the cement scaffolding of a construction site, 3 stories above the earth, dreamboat like. Where are you from? A bleak house abreast the Mulla Mutta River. Is that even a home? Certainly, a shelter. Home is all things womanly. When father missed home, he simply drew an extra room on his drafting sheet, more so, with larger windows and wider passages, flesh and bones and body, threatening to collapse under the weight of silence. What do you dream of? A place which does not replace me. A place I do not need to erase and perfect. A place like home. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Irtika. That was quite a trip around the globe. When I was much younger, I lived in the Caribbean. I lived in the Bahamas and worked
Mhm.
on a boat, and I was um, really compelled by the plethora of mythological creatures, most of which terrified me, and so did the real ones. It took a long time to acclimate. So you really took me back into a very compelling period of my life. Thank you so much for that. We'll get back to you
Thank
when we
you.
do some Q&A. Thank you so much. Uh, I'm going to mute you. And now we move on to Indy Horobin in Australia. And one of the great things about the APWT conferences is how many people you meet, so many that you may forget some, or you're not certain. I'm almost positive Indy and I have met maybe a couple of times, but I'm not 100% certain. I was down there at the conference in Gold Coast. You may have been there. Um, Wonderful to see you for the first time, or wonderful to see you again, Indy. So Indiana Horobin is a PhD candidate currently studying at Griffith University with major focuses in modern history and creative writing. He has had multiple publications with Griffith's Talent Implied works and a publication in Drunken Boat's 2020 anthology Meridian, which is this phenomenal. Whoop, 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 get on there, get on there. I've never mastered this. Why does that not work? Anyway, trying to hold up the anthology, which I don't recommend solely because I was part editor along with Ravi Shankar and Sally Breen, but because of how much wonderful work is included in those covers, including work by Dean Carrison. Indy's been published in Meridian. He has also contributed as a librettist in the New Opera Workshop 2019. The opera performance was dedicated to the late Stan Lee. He has an upcoming publication releasing with Swamp Writing in late 2022. His current PhD project focuses on familial oral histories told in memoir. Check him out on Meridian, and I turn the screen over to Indy Horobin.
Oh, hey everyone. Thanks, Tim. That was a great intro. Also, there's awesome readings from Dean and Ithaca so far. They were just lovely. I guess I'll just get into it. I've got something to read from some of my PhD work. I hope you guys like it. Yuta tells me what her mum said the Second World War sounded like. A storm. You're on the edge of it before it rolls in, the thunder, and chaos, and unrelenting rain. And the land stretches out before you, your town, stationary boats, a flotilla of green and yellow and brown roof tiles, and these tiny colors built on a hull of brown brick, aged and worn. Rain whitewashes the windows, pattering on the roofs, running to the gutters and sleeting off the sides in larger spurts. The storm festers beyond the horizon. It's going to come in. You know it will. It has to. It always has to. And the clouds are thick with lightning, ballooning from the centers outwards, a dark mass illuminated from the ground up. Fires caused by lightning strikes. White, yellow, blue flashes in puffs of monstrous cloud. You hear it, the crashing, humming in the air, electrified static, larger strikes jumping from the smaller ones, and the raging fire. This is what Bremen sounded like in 1940. Raging fires over the hills, illuminating the smoke, buzzing warplanes and flak cannons pounding the sky, stamping planes out of the air. The sound reverberates through the flotilla, shaking tiles loose and vibrating windows. And there isn't a single still glass of water. The bomb sirens start. You get to the bunker before the lightning hits. You count the seconds between when you see the light and hear the sound. Every second is 1 kilometer away. Your feet fumble and slip on the cobbled streets. The bunker is green, blending in with the grass. You shuffle in with your mother and father, shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. And the thuds start quiet. Same noise as the thunder over the hills. The storm is getting louder, pounding the road into town, gnashing between metal teeth and dragon's breath. The storm is a hammer. Your bunker, the anvil, and your town is the thing in between. Dust trickles from the ceiling. This is when you should get out. You're about to be caved in, but you don't leave the bunker. No one ever leaves the bunker. No matter how cold the stale air is, there are no fires in the sealed room. No matter how freezing you all are, no one ever leaves the bunker with the storm outside. And it's this. For a long time, it's this. Rumble and crash, silence. Rumble and crash, silence, tinnitus, ringing and ringing and ringing, and hoping to God, even though at this stage you're pretty sure there isn't one, that it stops soon. And why is there no God? Because no God allows women with children to be eviscerated by 2,500 degrees of thermite. Because no God allows some conceited notion of racial superiority to engulf a country. You see, it's not God. It's the bishop. A white man with white power who says, go forth and kill in Jesus' name. Amen. In the Second World War, that's who religion was for. Not the Poles or the Romanis, the Jewish, the gays, the transitional, not for black people or the disabled, but the white man. You can bet religion was for the white men. Sometimes I hate my blonde hair and blue eyes. And then I remember that, yes, German blood is in my history book, but Romani and Polish too, and probably Tibetan if Genghis Khan really did procreate so much. And I remember that my German ancestors, like my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and hers, they didn't join the Aryan nation. They raged at it, hosting their own private war on the Nazis. I think if there was a God, it's dead now. Long dead or indifferent. I don't mean to come off as pessimistic, but I think if there was any inkling of primary school religion stained in the back of my skull, it's eviscerated from stories like these, just like the bodies in Bremen. Back to it. You open the door, or someone does the next day. Your town has gone through the primordial stages of the Big Bang. Meteors hurled on the surface, blasted shock waves and fires burning the crust of the earth. A few buildings remain. It's mostly rubble, though. And there are lumps on the ground, blackened and charred. And your neighbors, the ones that didn't want to get to the bunker, the ones that wanted to go down with their ships, mothers and fathers and children who couldn't get themselves there. Your home is destroyed for the most part anyway. And then there's the damned. The few who didn't make it to the bunker and didn't make it to death. Scorch marks and melted torsos, they clamber to the unburnt, pleading for help, and there is no help to give. You want to cry, but you're dehydrated from cold sweating all night. You sit in the rubble, You sit in what's left of the streets. You don't sit in the craters. You stare at them. Your house is just over the way. You walk there to find burnt brick and more holes in the earth, and you wonder if it'll rain. Because when bad things happen, it's supposed to rain, something your mother and father told you. No rain comes. Maybe. Just maybe the bombs blew up the water too. Maybe it won't ever rain again. You sit and wonder where dinner will come from. No, I don't think there is a God. No one that will listen anyway. In Jesus' name, amen. These passed down stories, shared traumas, and in war, it's three things: those who benefit, those who survive, and those dead. And in the Second World War, my God, didn't America benefit? Hurrah to the fascists, and hurrah to the imperialists, and hurrah to the people who live with it. Erna, my great-grandmother, doesn't like to talk about the war, but she's passed things on. The Brits were nice. They cleaned up the wounded, brought supplies to towns harboring survivors. But the Americans were snakes. You aim them at your enemies and they tear them apart. Atom, blasted venom, bomb-tipped fangs, and then they turn and bite your neck in half. My great-grandmother Erna has passed on a few stories, but only one of the Americans. A platoon had taken the town. The air raid bunker, one of the only things remaining. Bodies singed and bludgeoned and pieces of bodies in the debris. The soldier found her, the teenager, alone, offered her chocolate, and she took a piece. And then in the rubble, he violently raped her. I see America now, brimming with neo-Nazis and Republicans and Q-fucking anons and anti-vaxxers and pro-gun toters and evangelicals and Trumpers and goddamn neo-fucking Nazis. Who are the fascists now? Who are the fucking fascists now? And worst of all, I see my country pulling out its paraphernalia. It's happening again. Who are the fascists now? Thank you.
Wow. I'm not sure if I should say thank you. You knocked me off my chair in a very powerful way. Initially, I was thinking aesthetically, reminded of the way Tim O'Brien or Michael Herr communicate both the beauty and the horror of war. And then you took it right home in a much more personal way, things that we're really feeling here deeply and desperately. Thank you. And it's probably appropriate that we're moving south in the nation now down to Texas, where so much of these controversies seem to be swirling. Before we reach Varsha, let me say something about where you are and where we're going. You're at Isobreak 18. This is an international reading series curated by and founded by my brilliant colleague Ravi Shankar, who cannot be with us today. But the series goes on, co-hosted by Asia Pacific Writers and Translators and New York Writers Workshop. New York Writers Workshop will be visiting Mexico in May and June of 2023. We'll spend 7 nights in Mexico City and then migrate over to the peninsula, where I hope to conduct the world's first workshop underwater. Might be a workshop of one, but it's still going to count historically. So we will be posting details for that conference in the very near future. We're just hammering out some prospects for locations in Mexico City and on the peninsula. And with that, I'll move over to Varsha Sarya Shah. Varsha is an Indian American, earned an MBA degree from Cal Poly Pomona, California, and has pursued a financial career as a CPA in Texas. Varsha's poetic roots lie in her mother tongue, Gujarati, Her chapbook of poetry, Voices, was published in 2016 by Finishing Line Press, and that makes us siblings of the same press. Varsha and I both on Finishing Line. Her poetry has appeared in journals, anthologies, including Borderlands, Asian Literary Journal, Convergence, Echoes of the Cordillera, Right Hand Pointing, Mutabilis Press, Texas Poetry Calendar, and UT Press Poetry and Photography Anthology, edited by Naomi Shihab Nye. Varsha's work has been featured on local public radio, public poetry, and been presented in a multi-language, multi-century classical modern dance program, Poetry in Motion, by Silambam of Houston. She serves on the Mutabilis Press Board as member and treasurer. And I turn the screens over now to Varsha. Take it away, Varsha. Unmute your mic.
Yeah. I thought you were in charge. Anyway, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Ravi, for having me again here, and to the panel. It's been a beautiful reading so far, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly. Thank you. I'm going to start with a poem that's musing on our digital world and our expectations from these communications. It's in the pentum form, and the title is Come Have Wine With Us. Timing is a true-to-life reality. Tweeting messenger, a creature of the moment. Alive and dead upon arrival. Come have wine with us, my message said. You replied a whole month late, aware a thing of the moment lives only once, seldom vanishing. Everything, I'm sorry, this is morning, my voice is, everything has recycled since. You replied too late to hail the moment, withered inside its invitation, not attained as intended. Another glass savored, hours of yoga recycled, but that's not everything. An entire month reduced to a handful of hikes, shows, meals, and dust. Invitations stale and shelved over a well-lived life. Countless cells remade by blood in a body's wonderland. What do a handful of shows have to do with birthday dust? That still remains an unfulfilled gift. The body and its blood, one wonders, who remembers what? Sure, just another day, certainly not ordinary. Any year rolls like a catamaran. An unfulfilled message erases itself like the cloud at sunset. Then dust. That stardust, our final destiny. A dream is only a station. Rolling catamaran. Oh, from rosy colors the sun forms ashes. How can we frame both in the same focus? You asked, will you meet up at Union Station and tell me of your dream over coffee? Nah, come have wine with us, I repeat the invite. Text me for a tiny toast. Let's paint it in fresh focus. Rebirth in real time, true to life. Show up whistling like a tweeting bird. Yourself. Thank you. This poem is for my parents. Papa is no more, but I hope to translate this one for Mummy in Gujarati. It's for them. And it's titled Romance. They enjoy the opposite ends of a veranda. Easy armchair, his favorite, relaxing against the black marble pillar, hers. Each poring over their preferred supplement of a happy Gujarat Samachar Sunday mornings. Folks with no obvious sparks, but for the aroma of our potato mirchi pakoras wafting from the kitchen and how he catches it in sublime delight looking up at her fondly in between bites dipped in tamarind and mint chutneys, licking every dribble with his pinky. On rainy evenings, she sets a steaming cup of masala chai on the tripod soon as he lays the umbrella on the veranda ledge, anxiously watching him dry himself. They converse with eyes always attuned to each season. Living and loving are synonyms. Their romance is a new coat of paint on courtyard walls post monsoon. Her stainless steel pressure cooker, the best available brand on market. He surprises her in winter with a sweet pineapple out of season, imported basket of Alfonso mangoes from Ratnagiri Hills in June, lusciously sweet and amid sizzling summer. When it comes to her wishes, he settles for nothing less. Neither knows what romance means, yet practices like poetry. The next poem, it's a reflection on our catastrophic Hurricane Harvey that devastated my city, the city of Houston, almost 5 years ago. We haven't rebounded fully yet, but here is a tribute, and it's called Shavasana, the final pose in yoga practice. Shavasana. Post Harvey, a mushroom colony springs outside our studio, like our thoughts. One pops, another shrivels. Some will succumb tomorrow to a lawnmower. The colony moves on the way we do in good times and bad, the way floods do, rise and recede. The Galveston Bay looks up to the skies, resting in blue, a monster hurricane marching away from us. Thousands home in shelters sprung through Houston. Some of us gather for yoga to stretch and calm our minds. Shavasana, our symbolic ending, so we can start over. This next one it's a tribute to a very phenomenal sculptor. He does very large installations at airports and other public places, and his name is Kaws, Kaws. The poem is titled All That Seems Mighty Yet Small. Kaws' small lie stands 10 meters high. A colossal sculpture near Concourse E, wooden marionette with balloon ears, eyes downcast, face and stature slumped, spellbinding. 3 a.m. at Doha Airport, dream hour, not sleeping or in my cozy bed, I Google small lie. Because it is a play between strength and kindness, the kind that makes viewer feel small and wanting to protect and console it. Such traffic of selfies, all in transit. Most can't resist to juxtapose themselves with small lie. A woman poses herself and her child with his teddy bear, pausing before moving on. This zoned out hour sprinkled with hush, masked faces on escalators and walkways journeying through a cold, immaculate airport on a Valentine's Day, in or out of love. I stretch to shake off stupor, mesmerized by a gigantic screen nearby projecting Kobe Bryant's animated body. Grace in motion. The legend and his little girl, Gigi, gone not long ago. I Google Kobe's Dear Basketball, a short film of what passes, and watch it again on my handheld screen, too small, but can't hide his sky-high spirit, the way the marionette consoles all that seems mighty yet small, including this journey. A 6-year-old Kobe tossing his daddy's rolled up tube sock over and over into the basket, his ultimate buddy. He surrenders. My love, dear basketball, I'm ready to let you go. Thank you. And the next couple of very small poems, I'd rather last one I end with a great big thank you. It's a little play. The poem is a little play with our universal struggle with the concept of being alone versus lonely. And I would like to call it Love Letter to Loneliness. Come to me. Come to me only if you want to give up your habit of hiding in the hollows. I like the heights, the feel of dirt under my feet, brisk air, and sleeping like a tree. Come to me, and I'll show you how to hopscotch with stars, their clarity making the clouds flee. Come to me, and I'll show you how to hopscotch with stars, their clarity making the clouds flee. Aloneness is given, our fruit for us to ripen. Get ready like a season gone to seed and patient for rain. Come to me. Come to me. I'll show you how to become a brook tuned to the pitch of its pebbles. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Varsha. Quite beautiful. Wonderful range of expression from Pantun to tribute to parents to natural disaster. Natural disaster seems to be something that's on everyone's mind. If it's not environmental, it's political. We'll save that discussion for when we reach the very end. What can we do in the face of what's happening? Really challenging times. I see that we have a shout out from our curator and founder, Ravi Shankar. Ravi, welcome. Great to see you in the comments. I hope I'm passing the test. We're going to move now to a little bit north to Illinois, so kind of a direct route from Houston to Chicago for Miho Nonaka. I'll tell you a little bit about Miho, our last reader. Miho is a bilingual poet from Tokyo. She is the author of The Museum of Small Bones, published by Ashland Poetry Press in 2020, which was the first finalist for the 2021 Poetry Society of Virginia North American Poetry Book Award. And she's the Japanese translator of Louise Glick's Wild Iris. That's a feather in a cap, boy. That's an iris in the cap. Her poems and essays have appeared in various journals and anthologies, including Iowa Review, Kenyon Review, Plowshares, Southern Review, Tin House, American Odysseys, Writings by New Americans, and Helen Burns' poetry anthology, New Voices from the Academy of American Poets. She is an associate professor of English and creative writing at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois, and we are delighted to welcome her to the screens of Isobreak. Ladies and gentlemen, Miho Nonaka. And Miho, make sure to unmute yourself. Yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you very much. It's such an honor to read at the Isobreak reading series, and thank you, Tim, and thank you, Ravi, and thank you so much for all these writers that I'm reading with. I've been entranced by their voices. So I'm going to start by reading poems from this book, the Museum of Small Bones. That's my debut collection of poetry that came out from Ashland 2020. And this one is called Late August Song. And there's a phrase, bone dance, and it refers to Bone Festival that happens in Japan, either July or in August, to commemorate deceased ancestors. So their spirits return to visit their relatives, and people hang up paper lanterns to guide the spirits, and also perform bone dance for entertainment. So this is called Late August Song. Like quicksilver, cicadas' voices well up from behind us, sister. And summer has hollowed itself to a shell to contain our fears clearly. In the village of our childhood sea, it's the night of the Lantern Festival you and I will not attend. Remember joining the procession, their bone dance years ago? Even as we merged with the fish-smelling crowd, each flushed face seemed ever so beyond us, between light and dark. Where were they headed in their almost knowing steps? Tonight is the festival of the dead, sister. Open your palm. Our pocket-sized father stands on the lines of your hand, holding a sparkler like summer itself. Magnesium rains in white flames, these relentless, fleeting seconds as we turn away from each other. My absent sister, cicadas' songs rise liquid silver from behind us to claim this season. Now separate, are we strong enough to sing against the ringing of something ever splitting, something more than indifference? Next, I'm going to read the poem called Floating. And this poem has a one line quoted from French surrealist author André Breton's Naja. And it has an epigraph from that same book. I myself shall continue living in my glass house, where I sleep nights in a glass bed, under glass sheets, where who I am will sooner or later appear, etched by a diamond. Floating. All summer, I long to become a jellyfish, so transparent no one could tell my body from the water I swim in. A bell-shaped gelatin with swirling tentacles drifting from one street to another, eventually emerging at the heart of Tokyo City. At every tea, Akiko and I discuss the story, which starts with a question, who am I? Yet we never ventured to speak of who we were, for it kept shifting, like our shaped ice smeared with bean syrup. Our tongues grew numb, while outside the window, parasols multiplied on a wet, black street. Can you write a white haiku on a white wall with white chalk? The moment Akiko's spoon drew a dot, a line, a stroke, it would turn into a code, imperceptible etching. Bowl after bowl, thin, sharp flakes flickered, melted together to quench our thirst. With my eyes open, I saw a chain of dream letters start drifting like tentacles, and between us, a gently pulsing shape appeared and disappeared, clearer than a crystal ball. And I'm going to read another short poem called When I Feel I'm Not Much Used to Human Society, which is basically how I feel about myself all the time. And this poem was actually inspired by this myth of a story of Princess Ogetsu. It's a Shinto, Japanese Shinto myth, and she's a goddess of food. So when I feel I'm not much used to human society, think of the story of Princess Ogetsu, the unsparing goddess of food, how she was murdered and what came out of her body afterwards. Silkworms from her head, rice grains from her eyes, foxtail millet, and azuki beans from her ears and nose, barley and soybeans from her belly. When I die, I will likely be an aquarium, bright and square as a little TV. My screen will show octopus eggs like a bunch of incandescent grapes, holding the words I didn't dare say when I was alive, but I wanted to say when I was with you. And I like to read at least one poem from my translation of The Wild Iris by Louise Glick. This is a Japanese translation, and I do love this cover. Actually, Louise Glick herself chose it out of several candidates. So I'm going to read The Red Poppy. That's a very famous poem, I guess, from The Wild Iris. First, I'm going to read in the English, the original, and then I'm going to follow it with my Japanese translation. The Red Poppy. The great thing is not having a mind. Feelings? Oh, I have those. They govern me. I have a Lord in heaven called the Sun, and open for him, showing him the fire of my own heart. Fire like his presence. What could such glory be if not a heart? Oh, my brothers and sisters, were you like me once, long ago, before you were human? Did you permit yourselves to open once, who would never open again? Because in truth, I'm speaking now the way you do. I speak because I'm shattered. And in Japanese. 赤いひなげし。精神がないってなんて素晴らしいこと。感情？ああ、それなら持っています。それは私を支配するもの。私は天にいる太陽という主人のために自分を開きます。彼の存在自体のように燃え立つ心を見せるために。心以外の何がここまで燦然と輝けるでしょう。親愛なる兄弟姉妹たちよ。人間になる前のその昔、あなた方も私のようではなかったかしら。一度咲いたら二度目はないにもかかわらず、己を開くことを許しませんでしたか？なぜって今、私はまさにあなたと同じように話しているからです。心を打ち砕かれたから話すのです。And I'm going to end with this poem called Gretel Through the Wood. And this poem was inspired by two poems by Marie Howe, her first book, The Good Thief. And she was my great mentor and a great friend as well. So, and Gretel is, of course, from the fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel. And this is Gretel speaking, but of course it's my Gretel, my version of Gretel. And this is a personal poem. Gretel, Through the Wood. It was like getting lost in the wood, whose heart you enter, one kind of person, and emerge quite another. Isn't that what a story is? A beginning, an end, and whatever in between. A clearing where you find yourself one morning, few crumbs from the dark loaf you shared with him the night before. There's no more turning back home. There was no home. It was like falling out of a dream and waking up in another, not trusting your body would cast a shadow. The velvet of the moss means ears. The berries for snakes gleam just beyond your touch. Leaves are the birds who have sealed their songs in green. Beneath them all, the water couldn't run purer. You call him over and over, the name growing more foreign each time, like a city that belongs to someone else's dream. Then you finally stumble into a world out of the wood. Your mouth will have tasted earth. Your words won't be understood for what they are. People grow restless. People grow restless when you sing fragments. They'll teach you poetry while bread keeps rising. Here, children become adults so quickly. You're the last girl whose shadow pulls on the ground at dusk. When the wind dies, you catch the sound of pollen falling gold between trees. Even as you sing in a new way, their way, your song points to him for months and years until one day it doesn't. There are more voices you didn't know you have. Don't be afraid. You're being dreamed by someone outside this world every bloody step of the way in the story. More hearts to enter. Don't be afraid. You're abandoned. You have been dearly loved. Thank you very much.
Well, again, thank you so much, Miho. I'm enchanted, and I feel really privileged to have heard you share one of the translations along with your work. I love to hear the Louise Glick voice, and then the Japanese. It seemed to flow so perfectly. So many notions occur to me. So many questions arise from all the readings. We're never going to have time to address even a minuscule portion of them. But let me just remind everyone that you're watching Isobreak 18, founded by my colleague Ravi Shankar, who's with us in the audience today. And this is jointly sponsored by Asia Pacific Writers and Translators, who will be hosting a conference in Bangalore, India in November 2022. Please check out the AP Writers website for details. We'll have a little bit of a discussion. And, you know, in Miho, your reading, I was hearing so many phrases that suggested themes that felt to me as if they were touching on what everybody was addressing in one way or another. One line was, and I may be misquoting to a certain extent, saying we ask, who am I? But we never ask who we were. And another is there is no way back home. There was no home. And I'm wondering if we can address that sense of home and away from home as a starting point. That seems to be where Dean began, and maybe we can turn it to Dean to begin, since he's been traveling and looking at other cultures in other countries and kind of translating experience through his own particular lens, all the while having connection to Australia. So Dean, anything to say about that? And then we can just move around whoever wants to respond.
Off the top of my head, well, I'm 29 now. I've spent at least a few years in total being abroad as an adult. So for now, I would say that I know home's there, so it's okay. I feel connected to my friends, my family, my home, my culture, and particularly now when we have the internet. I don't really feel disconnected. Like, it's okay, and here I am in Georgia. I've got a network here. So I just feel grateful and just glad to be, alive in this time and place. Like, we glorify the past for better or worse. We think about how the future will look. But yeah, I don't know if you wanted me to go in another direction with this question, so let me know if you do.
Oh, I just want to hear you carom off the question and do what you do. How about Varsha? Anything to say about Gujarati roots in Houston, Texas? Unmute yourself.
Houston is there's a fair amount of Indians in Houston, but that's not, and where I live there are none almost. But it's totally fine. Have been away from India more than 2/3 of my life, unlike Dean. I'm more than twice your age. So I have lived in so many homes, but when someone says, so where do you live? And I would say, well, Houston. Oh, do you like it there? And I said, who doesn't like their own home? So I'm really at home. And whether I go to, when I go to New York and hang out there, or Chicago or India or Mexico, every place is a home. Like what Dean said, I feel connected. Even though in the first beginning years of Trump era, it was frightening. I had to be very careful what part of town I go. I stopped going dancing in downtown because I didn't want to be harassed for the skin color. But, I live rather in a very egalitarian society, unlike the stereotypical image of Houston. We have the best cultural scenes here, art and theater and literature, all that. So for me, I think who you are and how you shape yourself in what's given to you, that makes a home for you. And I'm 100% at home. Of course, this accent will never go away, and so be it. Take it or leave it. This is my home. That's a long answer.
So you haven't picked up a Texas drawl?
Oh, I can, y'all, if you want to. It's like,
Okay,
Tim, it's like when you go back to India, it takes me 2 days to really make sure my K's are softened to ka and so forth, And here, I have to make sure that it's little, I have a fairly musical ear, so I can do a little bit of that. But this is Varsha, take her as she is.
I hear you. We live in Brooklyn now, and sometimes when I walk out on the street, I feel like I'm on the set of The Sopranos or Goodfellas with the accents that we hear. But the funny thing is, the accents are coming from multi-ethnic backgrounds, right? So it's not just Italian American types; it's everybody. It's just a very strong accent stamp. How about Irtika? How do you navigate home and away? I think the issue freezes Irtika. Okay, maybe. Well, I'll move over to Indy because with you, Indy, I was thinking, the past is another country, and it seems like you're excavating the past through the stories of others. Can you tell us a little bit about that project? It was so fascinating to re-enter that ancient war, it seems, in between.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, that's a pretty accurate description, right? This we kind of consider, like the past as just an element to timeline, a linear timeline, but it really is an entirely different landscape. And like personally, I have barely traveled outside of Australia myself. I'm going to Germany on a research trip this October to explore those roots and see all that war history and personal family history there. And I'm excited, but it's kind of terrifying stepping into an entirely different landscape, and then you've got all these subjectivities on top of it coming from each person who's sharing their selves and their stories, and it's very interesting, but it's a lot. Like it's a lot. And in my project, I'm if you want more of a description, I'm sort of interviewing my grandparents, and they're telling me all of their stories of surviving different wars. We've got Vietnam War and World War II and even World War One, and all these kinds of different experiences, and then other family members pass down and their stories and their stories and their stories. So it compounds, and it's like entering into travel, but the location isn't just the issue. Now you've got time as well, and it's this whole sort of balance of the two.
Yeah, thank you. Miho, did you have anything you wanted to add? What you were addressing with those lingering phrases and the notions behind them?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think like Indy, when I see places, and especially places that are meaningful to me, um, I see layers of, times. And so it's, I think it's a very kind of, it's the kind of experience with depth, and my body reacts to those layers, I think. And I was just really envious. I mean, I'm actually consumed with jealousy. Um, when I heard Adine and Vasha speak about their sense of being at home, I think that's just so precious. I mean, precious is not a good word, maybe, but something I just covet, and I feel like if there's a pill, feeling at home pill, I
Oh.
would buy it, because I just really struggle with feeling at home. And I think part of it is maybe being bilingual, having both Japanese and English as sort of places or realms where I can describe my experiences, my inner life, but just never feeling quite adequate in either, um, never feeling good enough. And that always kind of destabilized me. And I really struggle with it. But once you really kind of get into writing, language has its own energy and life, and you can kind of commit yourself into the hands of that movement. So I think I love that when that happens. But there's just like a great amount of fear that I have to kind of overcome. And of course I live in the States. I live in this nice Chicago suburb, but every night I dream being in Japan, different parts of Japan or different time zones, like different memories, the past or the present or the future. So I kind of feel torn, but especially because of pandemic, I think the COVID makes it so difficult. And the other thing is that what stabilizes me is actually hearing the voices of people like these really wonderful writers that I read with, because I hear their voices, their narratives. And even though I don't come from the same background, their voice, I mean, that somehow it just stabilizes me, hearing those piercing voices.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Because I have my camera set on blur, you probably couldn't see me raise my hand when Varsha said, "Who doesn't love their home?" Um, I suffer that the New Yorker syndrome of loving and hating New York. More often, I hate it. But what reminds me about its greatness is when I read about it. So if I pick up a memoir by Eileen Miles or Patti Smith, I'm just thrust back into the reason I'm here. And it makes me kind of re-love the city once again. Irtika, when I asked you, your screen froze and then you dropped out. Do you want to address this question as well?
Yes, I came to know that my screen froze just when you asked me the question. So yeah, my bad. But home necessarily, is anything that resonates with me. It might be a feeling as well. So I do not confine my definition, just for home to be in a physical environment, but it could be anything. For example, learning German I have really found home in doing this activity, doing or learning German for a very long period of time. So I think more than a sense of displacement, it means a process where I could resonate with what I'm doing. So that is what home for me is. So yeah. And
Okay.
today I read a poem also which is titled "A Place Like Home," which was more on my father, on about his story of feeling displaced at times. So yeah.
Yeah, I recall in your reading, we wandered around the globe, and you did then land on a home poem.
Yes.
And others did something similar. I think Varsha addressed the home country. And here we have Irtika. Ich mochte im Deutsche zu sprechen. Zu sprechen?
Yeah, I mean that's quite a good attempt.
Okay. Couple of questions from Miho. Oh, well, what book did you read from? I think that was the Memory of the Museum of Small Bones. Yeah. And is that available for purchase via Amazon or other or reputable bookstores?
Absolutely, yeah. Amazon definitely has it, but also small book distributors, and I think you can get it anywhere. But thank you so much for asking that question. I feel honored. Yeah.
Right. We try to post the links to any places where people might pick up the books of the readers. And we have noticed that they shoot up from being 100,000 on the Amazon list to maybe 92,000. So it's definitely worth giving us the link. Deedle, if you can find the link, that would be great. I'm shouting out to my wife. And then Deedle asks, when you translate a poem into Japanese, is it faithful to the original poem, or do you change it slightly so that it is closer to your culture and background, the world you are more familiar with?
I think that's an excellent question. And, this book, The Wild Iris in Japanese, it actually, this is bilingual. So you can kind of see English on one page and Japanese on the other. So the fact that it was going to be bilingual actually made me very cautious. It was a good thing that because the reader can tell, if there's any significant difference. But also, for the sake of the poem being a poem, not just transference of meanings, I worked really hard on the rhythm and the line breaks and sort of the overall shape of it. But it was kind of a hard dance to kind of perform, the faithfulness to the meaning and sort of a poeticness of, when rendered in Japanese. I kind of felt I was being kind of pulled in two directions, and I kind of have to find my balance there.
Yeah, someday we should have a panel that just devotes its discussion to methods of translation and navigating differences in language, because I was thinking about that as well when you were reading what I know a little bit, the little I know about haiku and the way it's kind of formalized in English in a way that undermines, I think, its essence. But that's for another panel that maybe we can get Ravi to book sometime in the future. One of the great traditions that Ravi has introduced to the great terror of all panelists is the final question, which is, do you have a message that you want to leave us with? Do you have any kind of assessment of where we are culturally, aesthetically, politically, geopolitically, and if that connects to the work that you're doing, maybe you can give us an idea how or why. And if not, maybe just tell us a little bit about what you're doing, the work that you're involved in now, or something that you've looked at recently, something you've read recently or listened to that has had impact on you that you want to share with everyone. And Indy, since you ended with such a message of profound despair, with which I identify strongly, I thought I would start with you and see if you can either drill down further into that tunnel of despond or lift us up a little.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually have noticed a bit of a theme within lots of my works that they tend to end pretty not on a light message, which is not great, but really I guess kind of points towards where the world is at, right? This is, I mean, it's one of those things that, like seeing this history within my project and all of these situations unfolding. It's one of those things that, like, right now, I think it's pretty accurate to say we all kind of feel like the world is not ending, but like it feels like it's building up to something, right? Like it's terrifying and it's new, but I think I can't remember who it was. Someone pointed out to me the other day, and I was like talking with them about this exact thing, and I think they said something like, you know, it feels like that, and maybe in some certain situations it is like that, but every generation has that moment, right? Like every period in history has that repeating moment of this is it. You know, this is the way the world ends. You know, it's written into history books, it's written into poetry, it's written into all forms of writing. There's always a point at which there's that level of despair. But I mean, we find a way through. It's what we do. You know, I think writing is one of those refuges that helps that as well.
I agree, and you're reminding me of the cyclical nature of the Gospel of Mark. We're always in apocalypse every 30 years, every 35 years. Yeah, excellent point. Irtika?
Yeah. So I would like to bring people's attention to reading more poetry. I mean, yeah, I mean, poets, they obviously love writing as well, but I think reading more poetry is also what we need to cling on to, to go through tough times. So poetry for me has always been like this light at the end of a dark and dingy tunnel. So I read more poetry, and I think that is my refuge as well in tough times. So I think this is the message I want to give, that writing is there, but reading more is also important. So
Yeah, always good advice.
yes.
So no disagreement among this panel, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Read more nonfiction and fiction too. Miho, how about you?
Oh, that's Ravi's question, right? Oh my gosh, Ravi, how dare you ask such a question? Well, let's see. This question reminds me of when I was at actually University of Houston, where Houston, where Varsha is. I did my PhD there, and the great Polish poet Adam Zagajewski would give us assignments, and he'll be like, "Oh, you little Americans!" I'm not American, but he was, "Oh, you little Americans, you're writing little poems about little things, and instead of those little things, I want you to write an elegy for the 20th century." That kind of thing, and I think we were like, ah, but I think it's I think it's really true. The world no longer, feels like, I think almost for the last 2 decades, it just felt the world sort of becoming, because of all the traumas and all the killings and all the manipulations. I just felt that the world becoming more and more like a dystopia, like we are in a dystopian novel, and there's this kind of real gap between what we used to believe the world to be and the ground we're standing in to actual like reality. I think there is really like no remedy for it, and we're not supposed to, as writers, I don't really think we are supposed to suggest solutions as such, as a didactic message, but I think we are to kind of state the problem and in our own creative ways, and also we are to really strive to connect with different minds. I think politically speaking, there's hardly any discourse between different schools of thoughts, and that's really disturbed me quite a bit. But I think even just this reading series, Isobreak, breaking isolations and connecting with different voices, different souls, different minds and bodies, I think that's really how we survive, and we will survive, however hard it may be. And to believe in the power of language as well. that we should fight against the cynicism within ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great message. And you're reminding me, just a couple of days ago, Deedle, my wife, and I were up in Boston looking at an exhibition of paintings by Philip Guston, who addressed the nature of genocide and apocalypse often in his work. But he said he's written about his work and spoken about his work, I think, in really compelling ways. And you remind me of one of his statements that painting is not about the answer; it's about the question. This is something that occurs to me all the time in reference to poetry and literature. How about Dean in Tbilisi?
Yo, so I would have to respond to Miho's comments earlier as my closing remarks when she was talking about home. Miho, you said you were jealous of myself and Varsha for feeling at home abroad, but I would have to say that no, I certainly don't feel at home in the broader society here. I mean, even just going out to the supermarket or picking up some watermelon from the shop is a cultural experience if there's a language barrier. So like, in my experience, I don't really think it's possible to really belong in another cultural society. It certainly has been my experience here and definitely not in China. But for me, look, we still have individual connections available, and for me, that's enough.
Indeed. Thank you, Dean. And we'll swing down to Houston. Varsha.
Yeah, I resonate with what Dean said. So did Miho. In that, I've come to terms with the fact of being at home, especially Miho. Every time after 4 decades I go back, I still am considered non-resident Indian, NRI, and it doesn't bother me. But then I say, who am I? Like you were asking the question. And here also, they call you Indian American. So I said, okay, those are just labels. Varsha is the same, whether in India or America or Mexico or South America. But back to the question of what are we writing? And I'm really looking closely at my full length of book of poetry's shaping up, is how to make it more palatable or to include all this. And it's very difficult to market that kind of work. But when I've been reading Ocean Wong's On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. And last year I read his poetry book, Night Sky with Exit Wounds. And these two books have been very informing, that this young man who worked even in the tobacco fields, as a child, to help his mother who worked in nail salon. And he was always on guard or just like on focus, being bullied all the time. And I look at all these and I said, what gorgeous work he has truly brought out, which is his novel is more like a poetry. And I feel like, how do we shape our work to be more accessible and attractive to people to read poetry, like what Irtika said, is to attempt this kind of forms, or where you're telling stories, which is what often my work is. It's lyrical too. But how do you mix it? At the same time, all of us, I was going to read a couple of really heavily political poems and I pulled them out. I had to work really hard yesterday to decide what to read, because I didn't want to sound like I'm so sick and tired of this crazy right extremists. And Tim, that's where my other side you'll never see on screen. Being a Texan, they're just, so that's the part that, how do you bring it in artfully? As a writer, I think it's the biggest challenge. I have one poem, it's called Penning to Frank O'Hara and Elizabeth Bishop. In that poem, and this was written in as of November 2020, I wrote them a letter. It's a 2.5-page poem, and it's beautiful, but I couldn't showcase it here because I wanted to share another spectrum. But I would like to put that in a book where it suits and people can see that the bygone era, this coming era of a young generation, what is my role as a poet? And I hope this is why it's taking me so long to bring out the book. My friends would say, Varsha, you have so many poems, just get a book out. And I said, it's okay. Even Bishop had only one collection, and that was enough. Not that I have that level of work, but or maybe I do some of it. But it doesn't matter. Varsha is Varsha, and I'm at home with my poems. And I want to give something that would make people want to read poetry also. That's a long answer, Tim. Thank you.
But beautiful. You made me very curious about that poem, the letter to Frank O'Hara and Elizabeth Bishop. That's Ravi. You have another panel shaping up for the future. I'll just say that I'm reminded of what I've been working on recently. I'm calling "Listening to Fish." It's a collection of poems, prose poems, and nonfiction. And I'm really inspired by the hybridity that I'm seeing out there among our contemporary writers. So looking at books by Sudeep Sen called Anthropocene, and Shole Volpe's book, Abacus of Loss, these kinds of hybrid forms that enable the writer to address the contemporary, the present, the historical, the biological, as well as the personal, in very compelling ways. And Listening to Fish is really concerned with the story that our friends under the surface might tell us if we had the time to listen to them. And this morning, the Guardian ran a piece about a young turtle who was injured and rescued on the shores of Sydney. He had one flipper missing and a hole in his shell. And for 6 days straight, this small turtle defecated plastic, only plastic. The marine biologists were saying that there was no biological fecal matter in this turtle's excrement for 6 full days. And these are the kinds of things that I kind of look for, and they plummet me. But I'll just conclude by saying more and more I find myself, in despair about the world, but never happier to be alive. And I'm not really certain how to reconcile these two things. I just love the experience of walking through this great blessing that we have. And I think the blessing is amplified, underscored by the work that you guys are doing. This was such a phenomenal 90 minutes of great work. I am deeply honored and moved and informed by what you've shared with us today. So thank you very, very much for coming on. It's been a joy and a pleasure, and I go forth enriched. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Tim. It's been
Thank you so much.
real pleasure and real privilege. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I was blessed to hear you all speak your fantastic writing, and thanks, Tim, Ravi, Sally, for having me on.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Amazing.
Yeah, that was such an enriching experience. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Tim.
You're so welcome. Okay, and so signing off from the blur of Brooklyn. Can I get my hand in front of the camera where it registers? No? Okay, there it is. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.